Hey, good morning. It's Friday morning today for Talking to Artists instead of Thursday, but I wanted to welcome you to episode 39 of Talking to Artists, the podcast designed to connect artists, art lovers, emerging artists, and just have a bit of an understanding of what goes on behind the curtain of an everyday practical working artist. So today I'm very excited to talk to Laurie Skantzos. So she is, I think, now living in Guelph, but we used to be in Color Shift Art Collective many years ago. So I've certainly known her for many years and been watching her progression of her work, and I'm very fascinated to see how she's moved from more traditional painting. So I'm going to, looks like Laurie has here a part of the podcast, so we'll welcome her on immediately. Hey!
Success.
That was really effortless. I shouldn't even say that. I'll jinx it.
I'm glad you said that tutorial first, though, or else I'd be like, what do I do?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Having it on Friday has just totally kind of thrown me, because even yesterday morning, I'm kind of like, I just feel like there's something I should be doing. And then this morning, I'm like, no, it's Friday. I'm cool. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, shit.
Yeah, I don't even really know what day it is half the time anymore, so Thursday,
I know
Friday.
I know it is one of the weird things with COVID, I find, and it's because you don't have the same schedules and regularity of things you usually do.
Yeah.
And so for me, this Talking to Artists is the one thing I know I have every Thursday at 11 o'clock, so I prepare for it.
Yeah.
So when it didn't happen this week, it kind of screwed me up.
You lost your anchor, your Thursday anchor.
I did, yeah. So that means tomorrow I'll probably think it's Friday, and,
A long week.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about how long we've known each other, and I guess, I'm trying to remember when we were both part of Color Shift when we did those shows together.
Yeah, well, I saw what you posted today. It was 10 years ago, that one show.
What? Oh,
Right.
wow.
And then I think I must have met you at Riverdale Art Walk. The first year I did it, I think, was 2008. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 2009 was my first Riverdale Art Walk, so it was probably then, yeah.
One of those.
Yeah. I know, because I remember being totally intimidated. So walking around, I was like, oh my God, I feel like such a faker.
I know. Actually, I had a really kind of horrible experience my first time just getting there, because I was coming from Kitchener, where I lived at the time, and I was really nervous because it was my first Toronto show. And then I'm driving down the 401, and the 401 was completely closed. So
right, they used to do that Basel Run for the Heart or something.
no, it was closed before Milton. So I think there was an accident or something. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be late. And I was late. And it was like a heat wave, I think, that year. I brought everything, all of my artwork that I owned.
Which you always do for your first one.
Yeah, exactly. And I had all of this art everywhere, stacked everywhere. And so it wasn't a horrible experience, and I was beside David Brown. So he's an awesome guy and has a very beautifully always symmetrical kind of set up booth.
Yeah.
And he was beside me. I'm kind of like, oh, maybe that's how I should approach hanging a show. So I learned a ton of stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I remember too, it's, my family was there to support me, because it was the first time I'd done this show, and my husband is just like, I don't think this is going to work, right? But anyway, so I remember this, my first sale, and he came to my show for years, he was just he would come and goes, oh yeah, I really love it, but I don't need any more art, and he'd walk away again, and he'd come back, and you kind of have to learn how to manage those sales and kind of stuff like that. And then another guy, he came in and he's like, yeah, I really like that piece. I'm going to buy it. So I'm like, oh, that's great. And I start packaging it up, right? And he goes no, I'm not finished yet. I want to buy more than one. And I remember it being totally gobsmacked. It's like, wow, not only one, but you actually want to buy 3.
Yeah, it's so nice when that happens.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
Yeah.
And it's great to kind of sit back afterwards and kind of go, okay, so what went well, what didn't go well, what did I do well, what do I need to improve on, what did I learn from watching other more experienced artists around me.
And actually every show I learned something. Even now, I haven't done a live show for a year, but I'm still learning. Every time I learn something from a neighbor or whatever, that's
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, and I think that's the thing that we're sort of missing this year. It isn't just the sales opportunities and the camaraderie and the community, but it's also the learning that kind of happens organically as you're kind of looking at how someone says something, or even how people talk about your own art, and then you're like, oh, I kind of like that phrase. I think I'll incorporate that into my own kind of thoughts and stuff.
For sure. Although we have been learning how to do things online this year.
That is true. Yeah, I can't.
case in
Yeah,
point.
it's.
Yeah.
I know. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and this woman, she's only been painting for 2 years and stuff, but she has like 100,000 followers. And the interviewers are like, "Well, how did you do that?" She goes, "Oh, I don't know. It just kind of happened." I'm like, "I would love that. Something like that to happen to me. That sounds
Yeah.
amazing."
What's up with that?
I know. Really, just happened.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's great. I'm so glad you were able to spend the time today.
Thanks for
And
asking.
and a couple things I wanted to talk to you about is kind of like obviously when we had Color Shift, when we were in Color Shift, and you were very much a painter. And
Hmm.
one of the things I remember the most about your work is a very recognizable black turquoise, almost like a lace type of imagery that you were
Oh
kind of
yeah.
using.
Yeah, actually, so when I first started, I was painting with acrylic and mixed media and a lot of collage. And I think maybe that what you're talking about is I had this sort of a fabric like that I used as a stamp. I don't know, it was very lacy looking. It could have been that.
Yeah.
Or I also made like lino prints, and I would print out onto this Japanese thin tissue paper these sort of lacy looking patterns, and
Mm.
then let the paint dry, kind of rip it out, and then collage it on the piece. So it could have been that. But
It could
yeah,
have
I did
been.
that for a long time.
Yeah, but it was one of the interesting things for me as an artist that was just starting out too. I remember kind of thinking, okay, I can really see the value in having a style or a color combination or something that's really recognizable and associated with the artist, because you could look at your stuff from like 50 feet away and it's like, yeah, that's the Laurie Skantzos,
Yeah.
you know?
Although now, I mean, 10 years later or whatever, it's like, is that a Laurie Skantzos?
Yeah, and so that's kind of interesting too, because I think you're also one of those artists that it feels, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it feels to me like you did those things, and then all of a sudden you're like done, moving on to something completely different, which
Yeah.
is a challenge because you've got to kind of bring your clients along with you. And so how do
Yes.
you kind of decide when to do that next jump, and how do you transition it so you don't lose the people you've been nurturing for years?
Yeah, it's okay, so I don't really decide. It's not like I'm gonna change this now. Like it doesn't really happen that way. So it depends on actually there's been different catalysts for the changes that I've had, but usually I'm really eager to learn, and I want to just explore every possible way that I can be creative. So I will do something for a while, and then I'll be like, okay, I don't know, it's not really doing it for me anymore. And then I'll be like sort of unsettled for a while. And sometimes I won't, like I would stop painting for a bit, like not that long, probably 3 weeks or something. I'd be like, oh my God, is it going to come back? But
I'm gonna forget how to paint.
yeah. And then sometimes I would take a workshop or something. So I'd be like, okay, I just need to shake things up. And so one of the first kind of major changes I think that I made was I took this workshop with someone called Stephen Imeny in Maine, and he does like really amazing workshops with abstract artists. It was like 5-day workshop, and it started like at 8:30 in the morning till I think 4 or something like that. Um, Everybody had their workstation that they worked at, and then I'm just doing my thing. And we had to write a proposal at the beginning to see like what we wanted to explore, and he said like feel free to deviate from that. So so I can't remember what I wrote, but I ended up changing from like I was always my natural mark was like this sort of loopy gesture.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden I just started, it's like, oh my God, no, that's not what I have to do right here. I have to be like just really linear. So I started doing all this really linear work, and I'm like, what the heck is this? And that sort of transitioned into, I don't know if you remember when I was doing that sort of more geometric looking work, like
Mm-hmm.
after I was doing the very organic stuff. So, and then I explored that for a while. So it's almost like I go to these extremes, like really
Yeah, because it
organic.
feels to me like you're back now to more organic shapes, like even like
Yeah,
paintings and the wall sculptures almost like egg shaped or very organic and very natural.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So it kind of spirals. Like, so I'll start somewhere, and then I'll kind of go over here, and then I'll kind of spiral back to the same place, but I'm approaching it from a different way. So
Right.
yeah, that's kind of, so to me, it's kind of like all forward, but, and it like makes sense to me, but maybe to some other people, it'd be like, what the heck is going on there?
And so do you find that workshops help you to kind of just get out of your own headspace and force you to
Yeah.
do something different? Is that kind of the thought? So it becomes a catalyst for not being complacent, maybe?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. And also, like, I really love 5-day workshops. So there's something kind of magical that happens with that. I like also giving 5-day workshops if I can, because there's like a weekend, a 2-day thing is nice, but to really do like a deep dive and sort of like go through all of the emotions and hit the wall and go, oh my God, I suck, or this is terrible, or what am I even doing? And then kind of like work through that. It's sort of, I feel like you need like 5 days for that. So, yeah, if I get an opportunity and I feel that kind of desire, then I try to do like a 5-day workshop somewhere.
So I'm guessing like I'm always torn between workshops. Like for me personally, because I love the idea of them, and I love watching other people work, and I would love to kind of learn a little bit more about their style. There's always a piece of me, maybe this just is an insecurity as an artist, but I'm always afraid that I'm going to lose my voice and end up copying somebody else's voice within the workshop. How do you kind of, I don't know, obviously you don't feel that because you find them really useful to your practice. So how do you kind of avoid that? Or is that just you're confident in your own vision?
Okay, so one of the things I do is I don't take workshops with people who say, hey, you're going to paint like me. I take workshops with people who are like, they don't even do demos a lot of times. The people I've, like, so Steve Imany's one, I took one with Harold Klunder and Peter Kalisnik, who's passed away, but he was amazing. I took one with him. He was actually one of the first teachers I had where I did one of these 5-day workshops, and like just kind of blew my mind. So none of those people say, this is what we're going to do, or, you know, so basically they would just walk around and talk to you individually and say, okay, well, what are you doing here? Like, what's your goal? What are you trying to explore? So they work with the individual and then try to deepen the individual's voice. So if anything, like, I'm getting more, I'm turning like more into myself. You know what I mean? I'm doing like more authentic work, not working like from someone else's kind of perspective.
So it's almost not really a workshop in the sense that you're doing it's lessons. It's almost like a deep mentoring. Sounds like.
Yeah, for sure. That's a much better way to put it. Yeah, and I mean a deep mentoring in a 5 days, like which is pretty compact, but it's also like really intensive. So yeah, all of them have been amazing that I've done. Like they've been fantastic, and also the people you meet are you forge these relationships with people.
Yeah. Well, in 5 days, certainly when you're so emotionally open and you're really intensely doing something like that, like I find when I've done some of these long trips too, it's kind of, you know, you build these relationships so quickly and then you realize, oh my God, I've only known this person for 4 days, but I feel like they've been in my life forever. You know?
It's really, really remarkable, actually. Like I've got, so from the, even the first workshop I took with Peter Kalisnik, which was, I don't remember, I don't know, maybe 2005 or 6 or something like that. And I met people there that I'm still friends with. And yeah, you did like really deep bonding. And actually, where that was this kind of magical place in Dunedin, which is near Creemore. So we ate together. Like we all gathered on Sunday night, had dinner, got to know each other. Monday morning, we were creating art. We had lunches together. There was like yoga afterwards, optional if you wanted to. Wine if you wanted it, like, so it was really, it was like just a very, like it checked all my boxes, you know. So it was amazing.
And how do you find the workshops that you, because there's so many, especially now online, there's so much stuff to choose from, it's a bit overwhelming. How do you kind of make that determination that it's one that's going to work for you or that you are interested in?
Well, that one was a fluke. So I was working in this art supply store at the time, and I was just like, it was dead, so I'm just surfing the net. And I can't remember what I was looking up at. This came up, like this, so Lynn Connell is the person who was facilitating it. She doesn't do it anymore, but it was like a fantastic space. So I ended up on her website, and I was like, oh, what are these? Like, I was thinking of going to Halliburton, I think, to do a workshop. So I think I started looking at that and then ended up seeing this Lynn Connell site. And then I was reading through some of the descriptions of the courses. And that one was like independent study, which is like, yes. I can't remember what else it said, but whatever it was, it really spoke to me. And the funny thing is I Googled Peter Kalisnik to see what kind of work he did. And it was like, oh, what is that? I wasn't drawn to his work at all. I appreciate it a lot more now. But at the time I was like, oh, I don't even really like that work, but I'll try it anyway. So, and it was like amazing. And
that's a really interesting thought though, that, you know, you can really get a lot out of an artist's workshop when you don't actually particularly like their work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and maybe in some ways that actually cuts that fear of copying someone else's voice when you're like, well, I don't really love this stuff anyway. Like I can appreciate, maybe appreciate the structure, the techniques or whatever, but I don't love the work.
Yeah. For sure. You can do that. And I don't know, he was really gifted. And like, actually, he was really gifted. Steve Imney is really gifted too. Like just what they do is, and this is what I try to do when I'm teaching too, is like, they give each person their full individual attention. So they're not like, there's group discussions as well, but like when they come around to you, it's like Zoom, they're really listening. And each person that I learned from had like a different kind of gift. So I think with Steve Imney, for example, he had a gift of like, I didn't even know how to articulate what I was really trying to do. And so he would listen to what I was saying, and then he would say, okay, do you mean whatever? Or is it more like da, 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 da? And I'm like, yes, that's exactly it. So he could actually sort of articulate for me what I was trying to do. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Like now I had a little bit more clarity then. So
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I remember years ago when I had my ad agency that I had a business mentor, and originally they wanted to partner me with someone who was like a creative director. And I said, no, I really want to be mentored by somebody who's completely opposite for me because they can help with the skill sets.
yeah.
And I remember the first meeting I had with him, I'm like, he's asking me these questions. I have no clue how to answer them. I have no clue even what he's really asking.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, it became a much more valuable mentorship than maybe somebody who's too close to you where you already are.
Absolutely, yeah, because you already know that stuff, right? So
Yeah.
you already know, like there's things you kind of know, and are more come naturally to you, maybe, and more intuitive. But if you kind of hit the opposite, it just helps you grow. Like it's just like, okay, I'm going to stretch that way a little bit.
Yeah, I can totally see that actually. And I think that maybe it's also just a little bit less scary, like in some ways, because it's not like you're trying to build on something that you already have that's kind of precious, because that's always the challenge, right? You have something precious and you don't want to ruin it, right? But if you're trying to do something, if you're doing something completely different where it's just like, well, it doesn't look like my work anyway, then you can kind of maybe play with it a bit.
Yeah, and then everything gets incorporated.
And so you do obviously cold wax, oil and cold wax medium workshops, and you started saying that you like the 5-day.
Yeah, I do. I don't get the opportunity to teach a 5-day that often, but like mostly I do weekend workshops when in normal times. But yeah. So.
And you're not doing anything digitally, right? Like you're not doing online or virtual workshops?
No, I've really waffled about that like all year. I know I should push myself to do that, but until I absolutely have to, I don't think I will. So.
Well, I think it's a different thing. Like we've had the same discussion with Creative Adventures too, like just doing, they're not intense workshops, but it's just like creativity retreats for non-artists. Mm-hmm. And I feel like part of the value of those workshops though is that, you don't have all that other distractions in your life because you're on site, you're in person, you're embedded and engaged in the conversations. And I don't know, I think that there's definitely a place for the online and virtual workshops, and some people are doing it super well. But for me personally, I don't learn as well that way because I get really distracted.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm there, I'm really invested, I think.
Yeah, I agree. There's like a sort of alchemy that happens when you're live. Mm-hmm. But I mean, having said that, like I've also had, online kind of conversations with people that I've had this year, like over the past year, that I don't know, haven't met, just like through Instagram. I've had like amazing connections with people through Instagram, like messaging and private messaging. And so I'm kind of like, some magical stuff can happen online as well. Is basically what I'm trying to say.
I totally agree with you. And for me, these talking to artists things too. Like, last week I talked to Deanna Fitzpatrick, who I'd never met before. I didn't talk to her before the session. And she just, sorry?
The rug hooking woman?
Yeah. And it was completely different from anything I've ever done before. And it was so fabulous. And I've got somebody coming up. She does these really great continuous line drawing. She's from the UK, and so she's coming up in a couple of weeks. I'm looking forward to. And she's like, "Do you want to have a pre-call?" And I'm like, "Well, I will if you want to, but I kind of like the idea of just going cold and just learning." Yeah. I don't know. And I agree with you. There's some amazing inspirational things that happen there. Oh, somebody just said, I guess they've taken one of your courses. They said that you're a fabulous teacher.
Oh,
so congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, we all hope that you can do some more workshops in real life then soon.
I hope so. Yeah.
So maybe talk to me a little bit about your transition from, I mean, you're sort of transitioning from the paintings and the straight lines and the organic lines, but then you did quite a huge leap with the sculpture and the wall art.
Yeah.
And I gather that kind of came from the patterns of the pieces that you were working with originally or something,
Exactly.
right? Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm not in my studio. My studio is downstairs, but it's too cold down there. We can go do a tour if we have time. But
okay.
I just brought so can you see that kind of thing?
Yeah.
That's one of my stencils, right? So in my paintings, I was making these templates out of paper, and and I would use them and reuse them. This one doesn't have like a ton of patina on it, but I call it a patina. They get this beautiful, just like,
oh yeah,
because I'm working.
They look like works. They look like works of art themselves.
I know, I love them. So, so using them, so what I do is I put the paint down and then I lift it up and I put it in another spot and I paint. I lift it up. So it basically is these pieces of paper are depositing the paint and lifting at the same time, and then I'm using them in different pieces so they get different colors on them. And so what happened was, this is in my other old studio. I had this giant, beautiful studio for a couple of years. And so I had them all spread out on the floor so I could just grab whichever one I wanted easily. And then I started oh my God, look at that. And I started taking photos of them just as they were, found on the floor.
Yeah.
And I started to become more interested in what was going on the floor than what was going on my painting wall. So, so then I'm and then I started sort of assembling them, and I'm oh, I can do something with these things. I don't want to just throw them out. So I started to just play with them and assemble them on a white piece of paper. And then I'm oh, I really like this. So, okay, am I going to, how am I going to attach them? So I thought, well, I'm going to, I stitched them. I started stitching them together instead of gluing them because I wasn't sure how they would adhere with glue because it's oil and wax. And so I started stitching them, and then I'm okay, am I going to put these in a shadow box or something? But I'm I don't want to bother with framing and glass and all that crap. So I'm what am I going to do? So then I thought, oh, I know, I'm going to maybe mount them on plywood, just as is. So that's kind of how it happened. And so I would assemble the piece. And, a friend of mine, Jim, is a woodworker, really excellent woodworker. So I basically gave him the piece and said, can you cut out wood, plywood, to fit this? So so he cut it out, and then I just adhered it to the plywood, and it became an object. So that's kind of how it started. And then I was doing that for a while, and I was also incorporating staples, staple gunning the work to the wood. And then I'm oh, I love how these staples look. So that became also an element of the piece. And then after a while, I was kind of okay, I think I just want to work with directly on the wood. So how's that going to be? So then I just gave him some templates of forms that I would use anyway, these organic shapes you were talking about. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, can you cut these out 3 layers or 4 layers thick? So he's sure. So he did that. And then I'm okay, can you router the edge so it's round? So it just evolved, right? He's yeah.
Right.
So then started doing that and painting on those, still using templates. And then after a while, I was oh, I wonder what would happen if we bevel the edge, so it looks like it's floating out from the wall a little bit more. So I'm hey, can you bevel that? He can do anything. So
wow, he's amazing.
Yeah, he is. So it's he can draw it up for me, and I'll let you know. So I drew it up, and he's yeah, I can do that. So then I would give him the template. He would cut it out, and then he would bevel the edge. So then I did that for a bit, and I'm oh, what if I painted the edge in fluorescent color so it would reflect off the wall? So then, so yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing now. And now,
so those ones that look like they've got almost a neon light behind them, they don't. It's just a reflective light.
It's just reflective light. So
oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Because it's this chunky piece of wood with this ethereal reflective light that's bouncing off the wall, and it changes.
Yeah. And it's remarkable because it totally looks like it's actually lit by some sort of a neon or something like that.
Yeah. Actually, my daughter's friend was over in the summer, and he's looking directly at a piece, and he's well, where's the light? Where's the light? I'm no, there's no light. It's just a reflection. So it was really funny.
And so you're starting to work pretty big, right? I saw on Instagram you had like a 3-foot piece.
I have a giant one on the go. Yeah, most of them are small, like they're pretty small.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been working on these little guys, but I thought, what would it be like to do like a really giant one? So yeah, I don't know. I'm still afraid of that one a little bit. Like I put like 2 layers of paint on it, and I have just let it sit now for a bit. So I'm gonna let it percolate a bit.
Well, and sometimes too, it's like, again, doing that jump is always a bit nerve-wracking. It's something you have to live with it a bit. I remember that when I first started painting too, someone handed me a 20 by 30 inch canvas, and I'm like, oh my God, it's so huge,
Yeah.
and now you don't even think about it, right? But I do remember that fear of somehow screwing it up.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, in some ways, it's easier to work large. Do you find that than small? Like,
I do. I find the middle ones are hard. Like the small ones, like the little treasures I do, I've got, to me, they're like sketchbooks. So I just play. And so there's not really a lot of angst invested in them. And the whole point is just like, a little pop of joy. Yeah. With the big ones, they're much more gestural, and your whole body gets into it, and you're physically tired when you kind of finish them. Yeah. I find it's the 1 foot 1x1s that I have probably the most challenge with, because they're not small, but they're not really big.
Yeah, like 11 by 14, like that size, or 12 by 16.
Yeah. So every once in a while, I get into the zone, and I'm like, I'm in a 12 by 12 mode, and I'll just do a bunch of them, and that's great. But it takes me a while. But I find it's harder to get into that size than anything else.
Yeah, I find that as well, like with painting, not with the wall sculptures, but with paint, like all the square foot shows. I'm like, oh God, I hate square foot. I hate painting at 12. Like I just do it, so I don't do it anymore. I'm like, why am I doing this? Like,
yeah. Well, so I find what I do is when I'm in kind of that zone, I try and be as productive as possible. So it's like, so at least I've got some like inventory for because I know all those shows are coming up.
Exactly.
But yeah, I find it's funny, isn't it, how that is? And then for the small ones, for me, they're kind of like, they're just fun. So there's not, if they don't work out too, there doesn't seem to be that much invested in them. I mean, they're small, which the reality is the 12 by 12 too. If it doesn't work out, it's not like it's costing you a fortune either. I don't know why I have a different mindset around them.
I do too. I actually, with paintings, I like a 5 by 7, a little 5 by 7. Like I like that size. And then from that, I have to go up to like minimum 30 by 40, or 36 by 24 by 36 maybe minimum. Yeah. Anything in between that it's like, forget it.
Yeah, like I like the squares too, so that's the other thing. So sometimes when you have more traditional sizes, if people want something more traditionally portrait, I always find that I don't know. I like the unusual sizes, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
So you're going to continue with the wall sculptures and kind of see where they go? Do you think you'll go back to painting, or is it kind of, you can never tell?
Probably. Yeah. I'll just wait. I'm really like enthralled with these right now. So, but yeah, I probably will. So I've been doing some paintings on paper, like sort of studies, and I like doing that too. So sometimes I'll just be working out kind of color palettes, color combinations on these, and that's kind of fun. So again, it's like pretty small, and it's on paper. Working on paper is also really freeing, I think. I don't know, do you ever work on paper or always on wood?
I don't. And partially that's just because I work with a palette knife with a very heavy bodied paint. So it's funny, I was just thinking about that the other day, because I find that the paper sticks, and so if I don't find I get that looseness. I find I'm very conscious of the paper. But, I've been kind of recently thinking, like, I like the idea of something like watercolor, which is, again, very different from what I do right now, working with very translucents as opposed to thick bodied. And I can definitely see the value in that. Like, I was trying to do some palette knife work in my sketchbook, trying to figure out the paper, and it's just like, yeah, that's a bloody mess. There's no redeeming value there at all. I didn't actually learn anything. It was not calming or relaxing. It was stressful and horrible.
Is it one of those things like, oh, I must have a sketchbook? So
it is a bit. And I'm doing this, I'm doing Nicholas Wilton's free thing, right? So I was trying to really follow along, which I find is so hard. Like as soon as there's like, this is what you're supposed to do, I'm like, I want to do that over here. So I'm really trying hard to follow the program, because I mean he's an amazing teacher, and I think he does a really great job. And like you were saying, he doesn't tell you what to do, he gives you the structure of it. Yeah. But so anyway, I was trying to do it with a palette knife, and it was just
so are you doing like the little free thing that he's offering, or are you doing like the big
No, I'm doing the free one just because I was finding that, again, like what you talked about earlier, I was missing some structure, so I thought that would kind of give me the structure of every day of having to do stuff. Yeah. And so I find that part is interesting. I find it interesting to see what other people kind of get out of some of these things. Mm-hmm. For me, it's also interesting to know he articulates what as artists often you internalized, so you're not always conscious of the decisions you make.
Right.
But you're kind of still making them internally, but it's kind of like he adds the language and the values around it, the conversation around it, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he's really good. I like him too. I've never taken a workshop, but I get his vlogs or whatever every week. Do you get those? Like he sends like a little video, and they're always good. Like they're 4 minutes.
You always learn something. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So I'm liking that. I'm love hating that structure. Like in terms of because you have to be like at 3:00 and you're on the live and so. Mm-hmm. But I think it's good for me. But it's kind of
this time too, like now, during COVID and everything. I think it's a lot of people are doing that. They're sort of just exploring something else, and it's sort of a connection to the outside world.
Yeah, I think I must be ADHD though. I find I get really distracted. I find it really hard to sit down and just listen for. It's only like 30 or 40 minutes. Like his thing. It's not like it's that long, right? But I feel like my brain goes all over the place. Whereas when I'm in person with something, I'm really, really hyper focused on it. So
yeah, but it's good to know that about yourself, right? Like what works for you.
Yeah. So I guess that's why I'm a little bit reluctant to invest in an expensive online course. And I'm sure it's amazing. I'm sure people would get a lot out of it. I just don't know if I would have the self-discipline to actually focus well enough on it.
Yeah. And I think maybe if you did something like that, you could expect to maybe change quite a bit too. I don't know, like that could happen.
Yeah.
It's always that. It's a bit of a risk. It's like it's sort of a risk, but it's also exciting. So it depends on what your comfort level is with that.
Well, yeah, and it's always fun to try something different, and so, which is again why we did the creative adventures. Like we kind of did sessions that were not, like hand painting silk scarves. Well, I'm obviously not a silk scarf painter, and it was a fun thing to learn and to do and just to play with and kind of encourage other people to kind of go, you can produce something super cool. You don't have to have 15 years of experience, and if it's not perfect, enjoy the process, right?
That's really important, like to do that with people, because so many people are frozen, like their creativity is frozen, and they really want to do it, but they've been knocked down by whoever, their teacher or parent or who knows, themselves.
I think a lot of times you must hear this too in your workshops, like, well, I can't be an artist because I can't draw. It's like, well, you don't need to necessarily be able to draw. Second of all, how much practice have you done in the last 10 years? Like almost every other artist has. I mean, you practice your craft, right? So you become good at it. But yeah, it was pretty amazing, especially with the silk scarves, I found, because there are some techniques you can use that at the end of the day, at the end of this creative adventure, they have a scarf that is sized. I mean, they can actually wear it home. And they look amazing.
Is it is it dry and everything, ready to go? When
It's dry. We size it or whatever so that it doesn't, we set it. And then because it's silk, it dries super quickly, right? So it's kind of at the end of the day, it's just like, yep, you made yourself a handmade, gorgeous silk scarf. You can wear to work tomorrow.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, it's like a play date for adults, right? It's kind of like a play date.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
With mimosas, and a glass of wine.
Yes, an adult play date.
Yeah.
No, that's really, I think that's really important for people to, I've had people say, oh, I'm not creative at all. And I'm like, well, look what you're wearing. Like you put that outfit together and look at you. You look great, Like it takes creativity to do that. So
I know it's really sad actually, because you have people that have taught themselves or been told that they're not creative just because they don't fit into this really narrow parameter, right? And you can tell by the way they talk or the way they dress or the colors put together or their homes that they for sure they are. Right?
Or, the way they cook, like everything. There's so many ways.
Well, I think even when you start creating, like I've got, like we both have a degree in fine arts, right? So we've been trained formally to be an artist, and yet it took me a while, and I did it a little bit. I felt a bit ballsy to actually say, yes, I'm an artist. Like I felt like, yes, I'm an artist, as opposed to really feeling it. It takes a while to feel comfortable with, that's what I am. That's what I do.
It's like that, right? What do you do? I'm an artist. I think most people go through that actually, like when they first kind of own that, like it's, I did too. Like I was like, oh, can I call myself that? I don't know.
At what point can I call myself an artist? Do I have to sell something? Do I have to just feel it? Do I have to be creative? Do I have to be published? Do I have to be in a museum?
Exactly. Yeah. And there's all this criteria exterior criteria that's, if you want to paint, if you paint and or draw or do whatever, then like you're an artist.
Yeah. Versus, if you garden, you don't have these qualms about calling yourself a gardener or a runner or, whatever else you happen to do.
Yeah. I'm a gardener and I'm like really learning. I'm like,
your garden's beautiful. I've seen your pictures and you posted.
Yeah, it's wild, but it's good.
I love that. I like that kind of garden. I always say it's that English overgrown garden that you can't really tell the difference between the weeds and the flowers.
Yeah, I like that. And a lot of weeds are pretty, you know, and they're good for the pollinating the, you know, the bees. And
yeah. My grandfather lived in England, so of course they had the perfect climate for a gorgeous garden. He was a very avid gardener, so he always used to say, "A weed is only a flower in the wrong place."
Exactly.
It's like, so equally, a flower is a weed in the right place. You know, like
yeah, I like
that kind of concept.
And so many of them are medicinal and like, you know, good for the environment.
Yeah,
maybe not gout, but
and just pretty. Yeah, yeah, I agree. So. What else? Like, so you obviously, I noticed with your shows, you said you haven't done a lot of outdoor shows recently, and well, nobody has, of course, no. recently. But I mean, even before that. But you've done things with the Spence Gallery, like the affordable art shows and,
yes,
and stuff.
Amazing. I love Joan. Yeah, so she still did the affordable art fair online, and everyone had to pivot, that word. But yeah, so that was good. I mean. And some work sold, which is great.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and actually that's one of the things that I'm so kind of blown away by is like people are buying art, you know, all this year, and they're buying it online. So it's like, yeah, great.
Yeah.
Like, yay.
Like everybody has to change the way they do things, right? Like you think about even online banking, how it's like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can trust it. Now, of course, everybody online banks, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so convenient.
It is.
So yeah, hopefully. And it's neat too that you can expand your kind of the people who love your art and are exposed to your art if you can do these online shows.
Yeah.
So did you find?
Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
Oh, I was just gonna say I haven't yet applied for Toronto Outdoor, but think I'm gonna do that. I was sort of waffling on that one. I'm like, I think I probably will. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen in the next year, so.
I'm playing the odds, so I'm basically applying for everything.
Yeah. Okay.
and first of all, acknowledging that the outdoor shows, even if they're going to happen, they're going to have to be substantially smaller because of distancing.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that shows that normally you could have been fairly confident you're going to get into this year. I think it's crapshoot, right?
Sure. It's all crapshoot. Yeah. So that's all I've really got planned. I have a solo show coming up in May, but I'll release details about that closer to the date. So I'm kind of working towards that. Like, that's why I got that giant piece. That's going to be kind of like...
Oh, fun. Yeah. My sister and I are doing a show together as well in June.
Oh, yeah.
So
in Toronto, or...
Yes, yeah, working towards that. But it's kind of, it's sort of, I think it's called a family garden. So it's basically based in kind of nature and the two of us being artists and being in the family. You know, we're same thing. We kind of haven't really formally released it yet, but...
Yeah, that's nice.
It's nice to have something...
in place? Your
Sorry?
House? Are you going to have it at your house, like in your garden, or are you going to have it in a...
No, we're going to have it in a gallery because it's going to, basically the pieces are going to be all 60 inches high, so they create kind of like windows into a garden, kind of. So nice. We wanted to have a large space where we could actually kind of hang it. Hopefully, we'll be able to hang it, and hopefully it'll be open.
Yeah, that's actually kind of neat because when you say like it's like looking out to a garden, it's kind of like how people have been living, is like looking out their windows, you know. And that's been such a savior for a lot of people, right? Yeah.
I mean, having your fingers in the dirt and feeling connected to something that's not digital and electronic, I think, has been pretty critical.
Oh yeah, for sure. Daily walks.
Yeah. Daily, and I mean, you can see how many people were. I mean, my garden this year was the nicest it's been forever. Now, partially that was because I was at home and had the time. I've always loved gardening, but partially too is that all the outdoor shows happen in the summer, so you don't always have the time that you'd like to have with your garden. But
that's true. Yeah,
I don't know. This year was better. And so
Riverdale Art Walk is doing 3 shows now, is it? Or 3?
Yeah. So one is it's the third week of June. So we've pushed the June date back with the hopes that we can kind of try and, kind of just be a little bit safe from being able to do it in person. But of course, because we're going to have social distancing between the artists, it's going to be substantially smaller. And then we also have Riverdale Art Walk in August as well. I think, and that was also with the hope that it'd be great to be able to do both shows. But if we can't do one, then at least hopefully we have the second option of the that one being in person, and then Art Walk in the Square, which is always up at the shops at Don Mills. Yeah. So
you added one just kind of for just in case the June.
I think it's a just in case. I think it's also will be smaller, so it'll hopefully allow more artists to potentially participate.
Yeah.
But I just feel like if we can actually do these outdoor shows, there's going to be such a huge appetite for people, like for artists to do them, but also for people to come out and do
Yeah.
something cultural and buy
Yeah.
the art. So,
And just, yeah, I know, just a little bit of normalcy, like, would be nice. And to see art in person, you can't,
yeah,
you
yeah,
can't
and
really
talk to the
replace that.
artists.
And talk to the artists, yeah, with through your mask or whatever. But
Yeah.
I actually taught 2 live workshops in the past year, like in Owen Sound and in Elora, and uh, so everybody wore a mask and everyone was distanced, and it was they were great. But I didn't know how if people would want to come, and they did, and they loved it. It was like just to be in a group and like have, and I
Yeah.
loved it too. It was like, oh, this feels like kind of normal, and I'm interacting with people like face to face, and it was really good. So there is a huge appetite
Yeah.
for for doing that kind of thing, like going to a show or taking a workshop.
I agree. Like we did, I was part of the North Toronto group of artists, which normally does a show in a church basement in November. So of course that wasn't happening. No. And so instead they did an outdoor, almost like a studio tour where you set your tent up at the bottom of your driveway or
Yeah,
whatever. And they did it I think it was in September. And again, you're not really sure because, first of all, it's kind of like, you're in your driveway. You don't really know if people are going to come by. Are they going to be comfortable? And we just left the backs of the tents open so people could walk through. It
yeah.
was so busy that weekend. Angela and I were both at my house, and there's about 20 artists, I think, on the tour in total. It was crazy and
Oh,
people
that's
were
great.
all really excited to come out and to buy. So it wasn't just
Perfect.
looking, they were kind of
Yeah.
supporting local artists too, which I think has really been wonderful. People have been wonderful about that.
Yeah, I know that whole supporting local has been really great, like in all
Hmm.
aspects, small businesses, and
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, that's cool. So, okay, now
Yeah.
I'm going to go and apply to that TOAE after. I'm going to
Yes,
like
do
snap
that.
this and- Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's lots right now. I know I've got that list of my things to do because there's a couple of applications to do this weekend as well.
Yeah.
So working on that. And I'm loving is it your Feature Friday that you're
Oh,
doing
thanks.
every Friday?
Yeah. Okay, so I have a lot of paintings, and I thought like I'm not really giving them any energy at all because I'm really focusing on these wall sculptures. So I thought it was actually my partner who came up with the idea to do like a video. And at first I'm like, oh, a video? I can't do that. I can't do a video.
You're
So
such a natural. They're so great.
um, it's just so funny. I was I'm very resistant to do that. But anyway, so yeah, I thought, okay, I'm going to do like a little 1 minute video. Like I guess 1 minute is what fits into the Instagram story. I don't know. That's what I discovered. I have to learn about it, but I'm like, okay, I just do a quick 1 minute, just to feature a painting and, just put them out there kind of in the world. So, yeah, it's been good. It's like another way I'm stretching by doing that. Even doing this interview is like a big stretch.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing too, though, like you were saying, that you just get used to them, right? Because when I first used to do them, I was really nervous, and I was sure something technology was going to go wrong, which it always did. And then you
Yeah.
just get through it and whatever. And now it's like, yeah, whatever, right? So, and you're actually my 39th episode, believe it or not.
Wow, that's great.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
I
that's really,
know.
it's great that you're doing this though. It's like, it's nice it's sort of a community building thing, right? Which is,
Yeah.
and also you can learn about people's process and it's
Oh,
nice.
I have learned so much doing these interviews.
Yeah.
And every single person I talk to, it's hard not to make notes. Like, oh, I got to make sure I do that. I have to follow up with that, or that's a
Yeah.
great idea.
Well, and that's what we used to get at shows too when we're talking
Yeah.
to the artists, right? Like we'd just, yeah, it's really good to have that interaction.
Mm-hmm. So how many of the Feature Fridays have you done so far?
I think I've done 6, maybe. I think 6.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, 5 or 6. I can't remember exactly, but I was doing Feature Friday number 1, Feature Friday number 2. And I thought, okay, I'm going to not do that.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to do I think it's 6, but
That's great. I think that's a fabulous idea because it's kind of, again, whereas you always have those pieces that for whatever reason don't sell, or they've been at galleries and then they come back, and
yeah,
without having the live shows, it's hard to figure out how to give them exposure.
it
I mean,
is.
a lot of times they're strong paintings. They're just in the closet, right?
Yeah, I know. And I have some from like different sort of series, I'll call them. So I wouldn't hang them in a show together, if I was going to do that. So it's kind of perfect just to feature a painting.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Like I used to do that with probably once every 4 or 5 years, just before Christmas, I would sort of do a blowout, especially because a lot of the ones that I had that were left were large, so they took up a lot of space, and they were on canvas, so there's always the risk of them getting damaged and stuff. So it was kind of nice to be able to kind of go, I love them. I'd love them to be on somebody else's wall, and give them some exposure.
Yeah, I know. I have no trouble. It's like, go live in your new house.
That's right, exactly. Like your babies, be free.
Yeah, exactly.
I know. I'm like that too. There's very few paintings that I feel like I really want to keep and stuff. I will sometimes keep the first one in a series that I recognize as a new direction.
Yeah.
Just because I think that's an interesting from a historic point of view, but I don't feel an emotional angst in selling them or giving them away or having them in somebody else's home.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's nice to keep like a sort of, I call them breakthrough pieces. It's kind of nice to keep those around, or at least a good photo. So I have something. Okay, I think I can just take a photo of this one now, and I'm gonna let it go.
Yeah. Well, especially because sometimes you're not really. I don't know. I find sometimes you're not even sure that's the breakthrough piece until afterwards, right? Then you're like, oh yeah, that was the piece that kind of set me on that direction.
Yeah.
That made me kind of go in that direction. But that's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. It is cool.
Okay, so I got a couple of quick questions for you. So how many, not both, these are easy. They're not designed to be difficult. Okay. So generally, how many hours a day would you say you spend in the studio working on your craft?
Lately, probably about 3. When I had a studio outside my home, I was there from like 11 until 5. So now that I'm home, I'm working less in the studio.
And why do you find that is?
I think part of it, when I was paying for a studio space and driving 20 minutes to get there and everything, I was like, okay, this is a commitment. I'm gonna take my lunch. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna focus. And I did like a ton of work. And then when I'm home, I'm kind of like, well, I think I'm gonna make some soup, or whatever. I'm gonna go for a walk in the woods today. Like, so I can really, and plus, I mean, just the times, right? Like, so I'm not being hard on myself about it. And I'm like, I'm just gonna spend this time in the studio. If that's all I'm really feeling today, that's fine. So. And
so did you move back into your home studio with COVID, or did that, so that those kinds coincide?
Just before. Ironically, because I wanted to travel. So my thinking was, with what I'm paying in studio rent, I could go for like 3 fantastic trips in a year. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. So move my studio back home. And then, of course, now I can't travel, but
right. Well, hopefully you have a nice travel budget building up.
Yeah, exactly. I can't wait, actually, to travel.
Yeah. Cool. And what kind of, if you had like a single piece of, say, business advice to pass on to kind of artists or emerging artists, what might it be?
Business advice. I think actually, have you heard of Artwork Archive? I would suggest getting Artwork Archive as my piece of business advice. It's really, like, I'm not a very bookkeeping kind of person, and it's visual and it's intuitive, and so you can, entering all of your information takes some time, but it's really great for, you can make these really professional looking invoices and inventory sheets and things like that, and you can track your sales, and then it's got all these charts, and it's really great. So I would say invest in Artwork Archive as my business.
And is that like a program you buy, or is it a monthly subscription?
So you pay for it annually. I can't remember. I think there's different levels of what you can get. I'm pretty sure. It's been a while since I bought it, but it's not prohibitive or anything. It's like really good.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And what would your big hairy ass goal be? Like, what would you just love to do if there were no restrictions?
No restrictions. I thought you were going to ask that, so I already prepared you. But,
I'm getting too predictable.
Yeah. Okay, so remember when I was talking about that, the very first workshop I took with dinner and lunches and yoga and wine and all of that? I want to do something like that. So because Lynn is not doing it anymore, and so my goal is to like buy a country property, someplace like not too far from the city, and have like a nice big studio space where I can have classes. And I wouldn't be teaching them all. I would like have guest artists come in and just sort of
fabulous.
Yeah, like create a hub of creativity. And
that's a great goal.
Yeah, I like that goal. So
yeah.
That's my goal.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I will sign up for your
Okay.
workshop. Sounds
All right.
great.
Yeah, you can come and do like one of your creative, what do you call them? Creative adventures.
Creative adventures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do something like that.
Yeah, okay, that sounds great. Well, we have to, our time has run out,
Okay.
and it's been fabulous chatting. I've really enjoyed where the conversation has gone. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for
And,
having me.
well, I look forward to hopefully seeing you at the Riverdale Art Walk, Toronto
Yeah,
Outdoor,
it would be
or,
really
in your creativity hub up north.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Hey,
thanks so
Kate.
much. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye. Oops. Sorry about that. That was great. I really appreciated talking to Laurie. And next week we've got Shelley Mansell, who is a new artist that I don't know. Coming up, we've got, as I said before, Olga, who is from the UK, and she's going to talk about her very cool line drawings, which I really love, so I'm inspired by that. And also we have Lisa Spanos, who does Blink, is going to be talking to us in April. I've had a lot of people ask me about my participation in Blink and ADC, so this is a great opportunity to hear all about her programs, and I think for artists it's a really great way for Canadian artists to expand into the US and expand your business practice. Anyway, have a wonderful day, and hopefully we will see you next Thursday. If you've missed this or previous sessions, they will be on my Instagram page, also Kate Taylor, or youtube.com/Kate Taylor Art. If you can go on and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it, because then I can get more subscribers, and then I'll kind of get a bit more opportunity to share this with more artists around the world. So anyway, have a fabulous day, and be creative.